Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making, help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and I would like to welcome you and introduce you to my guest for today. We have Paul Edwards, back for a third visit, I think. Used to drive large military vehicles through the deserts of the Middle East, armed with an assault rifle. Today he's a ghostwriter who often gets mistaken for a therapist. Bonnie Sapkowski, did I get that right?
You did.
Good. Is an unapologetic triple-vax meeting professional specializing in life sciences who has spent 25 years surrounding herself with people smarter than she is, and that means that she's one smart cookie. And Dr. Bruce Weinstein, also known as the Ethics Guy, is a speaker, trainer, Forbes contributor, and CEO of the Institute for High Character Leadership. Thank you all for joining me today.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And here's today's ethics challenge. Most humor elicits laughter at someone else's expense, ridicule, mocking, derision, and frequently misrepresentation. Late night television has built a cottage industry out of corrosive humor. It wasn't always that way. An old article in Civilization magazine explained the difference between irony and sarcasm by contrasting late night hosts Johnny Carson and David Letterman. The ironic Carson often laughed at himself. The sarcastic Letterman was always laughing at someone else. Especially disquieting is a study that found sarcastic people are perceived as being more intelligent. Satire seems to fall in the middle. I was called out to task recently by a correspondent challenging the ethics of my video series, The Ethics Consultant, in which I use the straw man tactic of one-sided conversation to raise ethical questions, often in response to headline news. Commenter wrote, "I can't think of anything less ethical than to openly discuss something with someone who isn't there and create your own answers for them." In principle, his observation is sound, but do the rules apply equally in the context of satire? Did I cross an ethical line? Ethical minds want to know. So, to discuss the ethics of humor, the floor is open.
I knew there was a reason you decided to include me in this, Rabbi, and that is I'm a recovering sarcasmaholic. And so,
as am I.
Gosh, there's just no coincidences anymore. There used to be, but there aren't anymore.
I'm mostly anti-sarcasm. I think sarcasm always has a target, and it always hurts. I love satire, but sarcasm, somebody's getting poked.
And can you articulate the difference? Where's the line between sarcasm and satire?
Sarcasm always has a target. Sarcasm always has an individual target, I think. You're generally talking about a person and some aspect of that person. Whereas with satire, you're talking situationally, generally. You're talking about a situation. There is no person getting hurt in that case.
I have to say that I don't see a relationship whatsoever between a discussion about the ethics of humor on the one hand and the way that you structure this video, because as far as I see, what you're trying to do is engage the viewer by making the viewer take the place of the CEO. And you could just as well have talked about it in the third person or left the person out altogether. I think that if you really want to make a fascinating follow-up to that, it would be to interview a CEO of a major company and ask them those questions, and then let's hear what they have to say. But I would be the first to tell you if there was something ethically troublesome by your approach, but it's just a technique for engaging the viewer, and I saw nothing ethically troublesome. Now, you mentioned that this comment was left on LinkedIn, and I've gotten trolled on LinkedIn. This is the easiest thing to do, to flame someone on social media, and so actually, I think maybe in a future episode, it might be nice to have that person on to flesh out their argument a bit, because I don't know what the heck they're talking about.
Well, it is. I should say that the person was very respectful. I felt a little bit over the top, suggesting that there's nothing more unethical than what I did, and he even backed down from that a little bit in a follow-up comment. But he was very respectful. He didn't really he wasn't he wasn't a troll. Uh,
But even
and
so, that's the video he's going to pick on. Now, I do, having grown up watching Johnny Carson, I do take issue with the premise of the scenario in which Johnny Carson laughed at himself and David Letterman laughed at others, because I remember many, many times being troubled by Johnny Carson's repeated mockery of elderly people and also women with large breasts over and over and over. So I don't think he has clean hands in this. And Letterman was off. In fact, if of those two comics, I would actually say Letterman was more inclined to be self-mocking than Carson. But again, I don't see a connection between that debate and what you did.
And I saw that as very satirical, not mean and angry, less of that and more of a storytelling.
Bonnie, how is it satirical what Jonasson did?
I think it was more of a story of satire rather than a sarcastic smashing of someone.
You mean in discussing why CEOs have had record profits with their oil companies? Are you saying, I just want to understand, because I don't see it, how either in his tone of voice or what he said was at all related to satire?
I guess I'm separating it from sarcasm.
Or even that. I mean, he has a kind of light. I'm speaking about Jonasson as if he's not in the room, but he has kind of a lighthearted demeanor about him. But I mean, a satire would like what Stephen Colbert did, pretending to be a right-wing commentator. That was satire through and through.
Maybe I should use playful.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely playful.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would love to see what a CEO has to say about what Jonasson said, assuming that these were the various arguments that they would make of defending their record profits. That's, I think, the missing piece in this.
Yeah. The one concern I have, for the purpose of this conversation, is that the people who are listening or watching may not have seen the original video, which was basically responding to reports in the news that oil companies were enjoying record profits while prices were hitting an all-time high. And I was bringing to bear some of the conversations that had been appearing in the news and in news stories. Of course, always with the caveat that we can't believe much of what's in the news. So you're right. I was using it as a stylistic device to poke fun, to approach the issue lightly, and mostly to stimulate thought, which is what I think we should all be doing for ourselves and others. But very often we will use techniques, or we will justify behaviors in our own minds, and we convince ourselves that there's absolutely nothing wrong with what we're doing. And I want to take this opportunity to get some objective views on that case. But perhaps we can transition from that into a more general conversation about humor. And when is humor healthy? I think most of us by now are aware of what happened at the Academy Awards. When do we cross the line? When does it become irreverent or hurtful or bad taste? Is there a metric for that?
Yeah, I was thinking, Rabbi, the video you did this. I don't think I'm talking about the same video that you recently did, and my comment to you was jokingly, I said, "Why are you yelling?" Right? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, that was a different one.
What I see happening is you're tackling the way people are thinking. And so I guess in this case, I'm gonna echo Bonnie a little bit and just say that I think when it begins to cross over into a diatribe, an ad hominem type of attack, and I'm thinking now of certain, like, they're called black comedy performers like Ricky Gervais and that kind of thing, where they openly cross over into insulting you, degrading you, etc., etc. That's something I used to be very comfortable with, and I'm no longer comfortable with. And the reason is you can't really know how a person is going to interpret that. You might not intend it any other way than a dig in the ribs, but that person's unique susceptibilities to misinterpretation of a message can very easily send them down a long rabbit trail to nowhere from personal experience, right? People have said things to me that they only meant as a joke. I can't really retaliate about it. I mean, I could get mad if I want to, but then it just makes me look worse, right? But I'm left not really having a way to process it, and having to just tell myself over and over again, they didn't mean it. But I'm that type of personality who doesn't let things like that go very easily.
I'm the same.
So
Paul.
yeah, I'm just like, I love satire as well. I love stuff that shows the convenient incongruence between what somebody says and what they actually do, right? And I mean, I find that stuff, especially if it's delivered in a way that provokes a laugh in the process. But getting into somebody's character, personality, assuming their motives, particularly if you're ascribing nefarious motives to them up front without even knowing them, I avoid that now. I didn't used to, but I do now.
Yeah,
The safest object for humor is ourselves. So self-deprecating humor, no one can take issue with. But if the only jokes you make, let's say as a public speaker, I know you're not a public speaker, Bonnie, but some of the people watching this may be. If the only object of our barbs is ourselves, it can come across as our not having any self-esteem. So short of innocuous jokes where, for example, puns. Speaking of Johnny Carson, he always made the observation that no one laughs at a pun, they groan. No one's hurt by a pun, just most people don't find them very funny. At best, they're clever. But most humor does have somebody else being hurt at the heart of it. But the thing is, like, I talked about this in a piece I wrote for Huffington Post. There's an insult comic from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who would make prank calls and berate someone for, let's say, selling them apples that gave them stomach problems. But he always let them in on the joke at the end of the conversation. So no one was really hurt. And that's the main rule of comedy is nobody really gets hurt. If someone's hurt, then we're not talking about comedy. Then we're talking about, I think what Paul was getting at is contempt, what Ricky Gervais is. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether any of what he's saying really is funny or just his open contempt for people.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, I think of Bill Burr. You talk about Ricky Gervais. I think about Bill Burr, who uses a lot of racist language and sexist language and homophobic language, and at the risk of sounding woke, I find that wildly painful to listen to. And he'll say, well, I can say this because my wife is black. And it's true, his wife is black, but is that really an okay, does that actually make racism funny or ethical? Is there really a joke in there?
I'd actually love to have a discussion about the ethics of wokeness, because why is it unethical or ethically questionable to be sensitive or concerned about how a differently abled person might be affected by a joke, or a Jew or a Catholic or whatever it is? Why is that troublesome that we have heightened sensitivity toward other people? I don't understand that.
Wokeness is really just kindness. It's just respect for other people.
Exactly.
That's just
yes. If
the
we
way other
that
people
word,
Yeah, it's the way other people have defined it. It's like
Yes.
calling us snowflakes, it's um, there's a line between humor and cruelty and meanness, and using the word woke to denigrate people who are trying to be kinder or more thoughtful is a really fun weapon.
Yeah, and that's
I'm
always going to
actually
be a
interested in
problem
Paul's.
I was just going to say um, when anything's taken to an extreme. In other words, yes, we should all be sensitive. Yes, we should all be kind. Those really shouldn't be controversial topics. But when people start perceiving offense where certainly none was intended, and perhaps where none was objectively given, and now individuals are being held responsible or accountable or punished for remarks they made that objectively don't seem to have really anything objectionable to them, then we started to get into a political culture. And that's what people respond to.
Well, politicizing humor is never a good idea, and we've politicized everything, so
Sure.
that makes it rough. But I think that we can take that concept of wokeness and that concept of kindness and separate it out from left and right, and just say,
Jonathan, you mentioned Chris Rock's comment. On the face of it, without knowing anything about the backstory, Chris Rock making a reference to Jada Pinkett Smith's shorn head as evocative of G.I. Jane, where Demi Moore had a shaved head and went to the military. On the face of it, that seems like a good-natured joke, but the reason she has short hair is not because she chose to cut it, it's because she has a medical condition called alopecia. If he knew that, then we could argue, well, that was really mean-spirited, but not if he didn't know that. I just don't see how you could attribute meanness to that joke.
do we joke? I mean, should we be joking about what other people look like?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't.
No. I mean, I think absolutely. Now I will say there was a critic named John Simon, a really vicious but brilliant film critic, and he constantly made fun of Barbra Streisand's face, and he justified it by saying, if you're going into acting, you're putting your body out there as part of your art, and so it's fair play. But that really does cross the line. But good-natured ribbing about, like yesterday when I went to vote, I was dressed in black, and the person who registered me said, "Oh, the man in black." It wasn't a major joke, but he was making. Okay, should I take offense because I'm wearing black clothes? I mean, but maybe, Bonnie, if what you're getting at, making fun of how people, their God-given looks as opposed to how they choose to dress, wearing a beard or not. If that's what you're, yes,
I'm talking about, making fun of people's weight, making fun of people's body, making fun of people's facial features, their hair, whatever. They're, like you said, God-given, if you want to go that way. Their clothing, is, I think it's a little bit safer, a little bit less offensive. But again, you're talking about an individual versus an idea. I think it's lazy. It's lazy to go to the obvious. Man in black, I don't know anybody that would take offense because you're wearing all black. But
what if I had said to him, well, I'm wearing all black because my aunt died? Then it's no longer funny.
He'd feel bad about it, I bet.
Yeah,
but the intention wasn't there.
Yes, exactly.
As opposed to saying, wow, you're really fat. Or, when you sit around a room, you sit around a room. Or, that's just not, it's a little bit different what you chose to put on versus who you are. Like
So
you said,
Paul,
somebody
Paul,
who's
you were in the military, is that correct? Because Jonathan in his bio. Well, first, thank you for your service. And second, you must have heard the most extreme kind of humor when you were on the front lines. Is that right?
I'll put it this way. When people began getting outraged at Donald Trump when he was running for the White House, I said, if you don't like him, you're going to hate our military, because that's what they sound like when they're on the front lines. You're gonna hate every soldier you ever meet because
But
that's
they're,
what they sound like.
but that's what they sound like when they're talking to each other, and there's a tacit agreement.
Sometimes.
Yeah,
And I
there's
think
a
that's an
tacit
important point,
agreement.
especially
But
going
you
back
wouldn't
to,
walk up to me in the street and talk to me like that. And if you did,
No,
you'd,
of course not. No, I mean,
there's
there's
a tribe there,
consequences for it.
right.
and
And it
there's a
goes to
tribe
what Bruce
there.
was saying, goes to what Bruce was saying about the Academy Awards is there is a style of humor that is normative in that culture. Those are the types of jokes they tell. Now, whether they should or not is
Yeah.
an open question.
A similar,
But if you go to the Academy Awards, you know what's going to be going on there. I mean, they're poking fun there, and sometimes it's not sometimes it's not terribly respectful, the comments they make about each other. So if I put myself in that situation, can I then claim offense when what's expected to happen actually happens?
Well,
I-
Paul,
Yeah.
you're in the platoon, or I'm not sure what the correct term would be, but did you ever find out later that someone in the group, while these jokes were flying, was offended by them?
uh, no, I can say so. I was in a minority in one sense, in that I was a very devout Judeo-Christian believer among a group of people who I would categorize as nominally religious at best, secular otherwise. And so there was a lot of, there was a lot of things I could have been offended by, right? They called me Paul the Prophet, and they called me, I'm trying to remember the other one, preacher man type of thing. They would always pick on me, and I'm just expected to laugh it off, and I just learned to laugh it off. Some people turn nasty about it here and there once or twice, but for the most part, it's just part of the way things go there. And I also encountered an interesting thing that I thought I would never see, and that was that once you have a certain degree of closeness and recognition and intimacy, right, in terms of the closeness of the relationship, a lot of the politically correct stuff goes out the window. At least it did when I was in. So I had Black and Puerto Rican and Chinese ancestor soldiers, and we would trade racial insults good-naturedly. We would do it. Why? Because you have to figure out a way to get along when you're in these stressful environments. And one of the best ways is humor. And this may be more common among men, I don't know, but it's groups of men, right? And so we're just finding ways to just rattle each other a little bit. And then the idea is you smile and laugh and you play along with it. So
As the token woman, I can say that that's very much a guy thing. Women absolutely do not sit around in groups and poke at each other like that. It's just not a thing. And I don't think outside of the military or groups like that, you see it on as such a common behavior. And
that is true. It is very much in context, which basically goes back, Bonnie, to what I believe about things like satire versus sarcasm and all that. There are relationships I've had where all of them male to male, but where we can make fun of each other till the cows come home, and we know we're just kidding because we're that close of a brotherhood, and mainly in the military. There've been a few outside. But I would never, that kind of joking, even though I have a great relationship with Rabbi Goldson, I would never do to him because I'm not that close to him, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm closer with him than I am with either of you because I've known him longer and all that. So there's probably some things that he and I could joke about and laughingly smile and all that we couldn't when we first met. But you have to get to that point. You have to earn that kind of joking ability. And when you don't have it, my philosophy is don't do it. Even so, I would also say, circling back to this video that Rabbi made, satirizing opinions and positions and behaviors that people do in the public eye, to me, when people are being stupid, to stand there and call it perfectly sane, it doesn't is just, I mean, like, I love this Babylon Bee publication that they have online because they satirize people like me, right, when we do stupid things. And so it just makes it, you know, it makes it less, it's fun. I enjoy it. And I don't take it personally or get offended by it. Because many times what they're pointing out is, yeah, we're being absurd. We're not being consistent. Let's fix this.
And you're talking about a type of person as opposed to an individual. So you're not, you know, you're not on the phone with, you know, Henry Ford talking about his, you know, how stupid he is for making the wheels the way he did.
Right.
You know, it's a much more general kind of, again, it's storytelling. It's just another device to tell a story. And the difference between you with your friends and somebody up on stage insulting individuals, I think that's night and day. And it's just like you said, it's exactly what you said, Paul, which is that you earn the right to be that bold. And again, it's I have to wonder when we talk about how you're talking about how actors kind of sign up for that. I would counter that actors are probably more sensitive than the rest of us put together. You know, why else do we need to stand in front of a bunch of people and look for validation? they're I'm sure it hurts them just as much as anybody else, and I don't think they should be immune to it. Personally. And I have a lot of men friends that have been my friends since my youth, and I hear them, you know, we'll all be together and they'll beat each other up in just the way you were talking about, but they wouldn't do it to me. No. And honestly, I would, they can say a lot of things to me, but not that kind of stuff.
No.
I have a question for each of the panelists.
Yeah. I was just going to say that we don't build an immunity in our youth to that like men do.
So Bonnie, who are some of your favorite stand-up comics or comedians generally?
I love Ricky Gervais. I absolutely love Ricky Gervais because he's smart and he calls out. He doesn't generally speak about individuals. He's talking about concepts. I forget the Academy.
Actually, if you look at his emceeing of the Golden Globes, it's entirely ad hominem.
Yes,
from beginning to end.
But I did not watch the Golden Globes. I'm thinking of his stand-up and his acting career, his afterlife.
Yes.
He addresses these incredibly intense topics like God and death and developmental disabilities, and he does it with when he's not on stage at the Academy Awards, he does it with such a depth. Watch some of his other stuff, but no, I don't watch a whole lot of stand-up acts anymore. So I don't have one to pick, but yeah, I love Ricky Gervais.
Jonathan, who makes you laugh?
Oh, gosh, I just don't watch much of this stuff anymore. You know, I often comment that back in my day, George Carlin was one of the most brilliant comics, but you know, when he was on television and couldn't swear, he was hilarious. When he was where he could swear, I didn't think it was particularly funny. And you mentioned earlier, Bonnie, laziness.
Yeah.
I think that we default to profanity and insults in the absence of real cleverness. I mean, George Carlin was a genius.
Yes.
But when he didn't have to invoke that genius, I thought he was not that funny.
I thought he went, I always say that he went from being a brilliant social commentator to an angry old man. There was a point in his career that, and I don't know if it was when he was able to start saying the things that he said, where he got super lazy and you know, turned into a kids these days. And am I right? And the sharpness of his humor and the brains behind his humor, the genius of his humor got dulled. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's when he was able to say those 7 words that he got lazy.
That you can't say on television.
Exactly.
I
We're
guess I'm
just
in the
about out
minority
of time
'cause-
for this segment. I would just make one comment, and I wish I could remember the comic's name. But go on Google and look up Three Little Pigs in Shakespearean English.
See, now I would find
It-
that hysterical.
It is one of the most brilliant pieces of comedy I have ever seen. It goes on for about 10 minutes. There is not one insult or one word of profanity in the entire thing. It is absolutely inspired. Now, the amount of effort that goes into producing a piece of comedy like that, I can't even imagine. But it's a wonderful example of how we can be hysterically funny in a way that doesn't cross any lines, doesn't even flirt with the lines, but that it's often so much easier to default to the easy laughs, the low-hanging fruit, the cheap shots. And as we've been saying, right, it's a shifting line. I mean, comedians by definition need to push the envelope. They need to push the boundaries. And when you push the boundaries, sometimes you're going to go over them.
Yeah.
And I think everybody
Everybody
should get a gimme. Everybody
Sure.
should be allowed to say something stupid and be forgiven for that. But when it's all you've got, yeah.
So we're going to pause here, and I'd like to thank all of you, Paul Edwards, Bonnie Sepkowski, and
Bonnie.
Bruce Weinstein. We will actually continue this conversation, but I hope you will join me again. For those of you watching and listening, if you'd like to suggest an ethical scenario or a dilemma for discussion, please go to my website, jonasongoldson.com, and use the contact box to submit your proposal. If you have a compelling idea, we will definitely take it up. If you are a Grappling with the Gray member, or if you were invited by one of our guests, please use the community link or the link that you have to participate in a follow-up open forum and continue discussion. If you're not a member, please go to gwtg.live. That's gwtg.live, where you can sign up for a free 30-day trial and enjoy member benefits. Please join us again next week as we have a new panel discussing a new ethical dilemma as we grapple with the gray.